Coaster Chad here with the video. Today we're going to talk about Wild Thing, Valley Fair's new Morgan Hypercoaster. And let me tell you, it's totally rad.
Hey Coaster Chad, I'm Micah, and I live in 24 years in the future, and I'm here to tell you that Wild Thing is just okay. Ah yes, a Valley Fair video. You see, I'm an official Valley Fair fanboy. My state's government already knows that. And if you go to Valley Fair, there's obviously going to be some GP. And if you ask the GP, what's your favorite roller coaster, they'll probably say, oh, Wild Thing. Because the GP loves Wild Thing. I mean, hey, I do too. I have a t-shirt. Wild Thing was the first roller coaster I went on at Valley Fair, and I absolutely loved it. I think Wild Thing's a good roller coaster. It's just that it's not my favorite. I think Renegade's a lot better. But anyways, Wild Thing's still a pretty decent ride, but some people think otherwise. There are some people who crap on this coaster for many reasons. Like, the first Helix is garbage, but the mid-course brake run's horrible, and the chain lift takes forever! And while all this may be true, I still think Wild Thing is a great ride and a little underrated. So I think it's time to look at Wild Thing with more of a critical eye and see where it comes to. So with that said, let's review Wild Thing. But first, a little history lesson if you will. The year is 1989, and Cedar Point built the world's first coaster above 200 feet. It was a hypercoaster, Magnum XL 200. And that blew up. After that, so many parks were trying to build a hypercoaster and trying to top Cedar Fair's record. And now it's the 1990s, and during all this madness of parks trying to break the record, Cedar Fair decides to build a hypercoaster for its other park, Valley Fair. And it was kind of strange because this roller coaster was built by Morgan, which Magnum XL 200 was built by Arrow. So it's kind of weird. I don't know what happened between Arrow and Cedar Fair, but I guess Cedar Fair just went with Morgan for this one. And fun fact, this is actually Morgan's first ever hypercoaster. Back in the early 90s, Morgan was mostly known for its flat rides and its one coaster called Quicksilver Express, which is a mine train. So for Morgan, this project was very big for them. And now fast forward to May 1996, and Wild Thing officially opens at Valley Fair. And at this time, it was the fourth tallest coaster in the world, with a height of 207 feet and a top speed of 74 miles per hour. Back in the day, this is a pretty big deal. And after that, Cedar Fair hit copy and paste, and in the year 1997, they opened up Steel Force at Dorney Park, which is very similar to Wild Thing. And a year after that, Cedar Fair is like, you know what? Let's do it again. So they built Mamba at Worlds of Fun, the final Morgan hypercoaster in the Cedar Fair chain, which is very similar to Steel Force. Same color scheme and same layout, kind of, but still. Out of all these three coasters, Wild Thing is considered to be the weakest one. But why is that? Let's go through the POV and let's review it piece by piece. Alright guys, admit it, this color scheme is pretty nice. I love the green with the dark green, it looks really, really cool. Next up we got a chain lift, and it's a pretty big coaster, so it's gonna take a while. Let's time it. Alright, 42 seconds, not that bad. Alright, anyways, our first drop is right here, and if you're in the back row, or any row, you might get a little floater airtime, but especially in the back. And this drop is actually very fun. It's very exhilarating, and I like how it holds you back for a little bit. You will get thrown over the edge, and it's just super cool. So the first drop is actually pretty good. After the drop comes the first hill, and oh my goodness, this is the best part of Wild Thing by far. This hill, I am not kidding you, has a ton of floater airtime. Like, you are out of your seat floating for the entire hill. It's so fun. This hill is the reason why Wild Thing is kind of underrated. After that, we head back up, and if you're in the back row, You get a little pop of airtime, but it's not a lot. Anyways, we had this curve, and I believe you hit 3.5 Gs on this curve. I'm not sure about that. I could be wrong, but you kind of feel it. It's not super forceful, but it's still very fun regardless. And now we have our first helix, and well, this helix can be described in one word. Yeah, this helix is forceless and boring, kind of. It's super drawn out, and it's not the best. It definitely could have been better. Now the second helix is actually not bad. This one's also super drawn out, but because you're going at a higher speed on this one, you actually get some force, and it actually is really nice. So this helix is pretty good. And if you thought this roller coaster was good so far, then you were wrong! Because they just had to put the trim brakes right there. The trim brakes don't stop you to a complete stop, but it certainly feels like it. So yeah, this part of the ride is definitely the biggest buzzkill ever. Ah well, at least there's airtime hills after the brake run, and if I'm being honest, these airtime hills are pretty inconsistent with their airtime. Like, sometimes I ride this coaster and I get some airtime on these hills, but in the next ride I get none. It's kind of weird. My guess is that the trim brakes probably hurt the airtime hills, because if the trim brakes aren't as harsh, you actually get a lot of airtime. But since pretty much 80% of the time the trim brakes are super strict, then you probably won't get a lot of airtime. But hey, there's a tunnel. That's pretty cool. So yeah, overall, these hills are kind of a hit or miss, but at least that tunnel is pretty cool. If the timing is right, then you might get some airtime. So yeah, it's pretty decent. And now we come to the final brake run to finish off our ride. So yeah, overall, Wild Thing has a pretty lame first helix, a buzz-killing trim brake section, and some pretty mediocre airtime hills. But this coaster is actually not that bad, because the drop is very fun, the first airtime hill is awesome, and that curve into the first helix is pretty good. But if you compare it to other hypercoasters, this one seems a little outdated, and comparing it to a B&M hyper, it's kind of inferior. But if you compare it to Steel Force or Mamba or even Steel Eel, Wild Thing's actually not that bad. It's very enjoyable, and I certainly enjoyed every single ride I have on it. So Wild Thing's final score will be a 7 out of 10. Yes, this coaster has a lot of flaws, but the pros kind of balance it out. This coaster is pretty fun, and there's certainly some thrill to be had here. And right now, I want to know what you think, so be sure to comment down below, and if you enjoyed this video, please give a like. And if you're new here, I would totally recommend hitting that subscribe button. It helps out a lot and be very well appreciated. But with that said, take it easy you guys, and I'll see you next time on North Star Coasters.